In honor of the month of Halloween and the fact that my horror content has been receiving better, love and better reception as of late, I've decided to follow up on a poll I ran in my community tab that was basically like, yo, what horror versus matchup do you guys want to see? And by a pretty large margin, werewolves versus vampires won. Now, what's most fascinating about this topic? By the way, if you love horror, um, run the likes up on this video because I'll definitely continue to finish this out throughout the month of October if you guys show support. But anyways, getting back to this turned out to be a lot more convoluted of a topic than I thought it was, because initially I thought like, okay, I always assumed werewolves versus vampire dated back to ancient times, right? Not exactly. You see, a lot of this stuff was almost like Godzilla King Kong. Basically, society invented the beef because we love these two horror characters. So, with that in mind, this is going to be an analysis of like the mythology of both characters and before they hit the mainstream, who would have really won. And then if this gets 300 likes, I will do mainstream vampires versus mainstream werewolves. Who would win in a modern day battle? But let's get this one out the way. So, going over werewolves, what do they bring to the table? So, werewolves have a fascinating mythological background dating back to ancient times, to where it was believed that werewolves or weremen were sometimes brought about by the gods to help society and man in defeating evil that they could not beat by themselves. Sometimes this included them resorting to magic, but typically they were associated with extremely amped physical gifts, high regeneration, and a particular bloodlust when in battle. Some common myths or tropes that were added in modern times in like movies and stuff was like they need the moonlight. Typically in lore, they didn't, right? They could actually willfully change. By the way, I'm not including skin crawlers in this. Shout out to my guy Kua or Reality Spine, one of the coffee shop members. I had a discussion about this topic with him. He's a mythology guy. Skinwalkers seem to just be a completely different deal than werewolves entirely, so I did not include them in this battle. But getting back to this, um, some lore and mythos does have them weak to things like silver. And typically they were seen as like to finally finish them off, you would get your heart cut out and burned. A lot of werewolves, it kind of gets complicated in history. Some are seen as good, like I said, but on the other side, and it seems to have a more negative connotation with werewolves, not weremen. Werewolves sometimes were associated with like putting on skin pelts and wolf pelts, adopting the wolf powers and being affronts to gods or God, whichever way you want to look at it. Regardless, they were remembered as fierce combatants. Another myth about them that they're extremely dumb in their bloodlust. That's not true. Most of the mythos, including the ones like the Irish, had them quite intelligent and allowed them to battle intensely powerful foes. Looking over on the vampire side, vampires date all the way back to ancient times as well, with one of the first maybe ancient vampires we're talking about dating back to being affected by Apollo. Basically, the god Apollo got mad at a dude for trying to bang a chick he liked. So as a result, he made him basically get folded every time he went out in the sun. Only way I believe he could solve it was to drink the blood of the woman he took the L for. Horrible situation, but typical in mythology. The gods were assholes. But, anyways, this is typically one of the origins for how vampires came to be, and they do have a much more negative connotation. In fact, in the early mythology, before they got more mainlined, vampires were seen as like darkened skin and bloated, more resembling corpse, as they were like Revenites of sorts and the undead. They were another branch of like the zombie type mythos and lore. They were very ugly, very brutal, and their plagues and poison could wipe out entire towns as they descended upon people and brutalized them in a direct affront to gods, Christianity, and any gods you worshipped. By the way, I'm not taking in like the high wonky outlier cases for characters. Like, there's some versions of vampires that's tied with like powers to gods, but same thing for werewolves if we got to the insane loopy high end. So, because like it was directly stated a couple times, they're like emissaries for gods themselves. So I'd be cautious with that. I don't want to get into the crazy side. I want to get into like the more average in the mythos and lore. Um, Now, because of their more direct ties to satanic and devilish roots, a lot of their mythos was surrounded by holy and ritualistic items, being able to take them out, as well as wooden stakes to the heart, harsh exorcisms, and all that. Um, Sometimes they, in some mythos, they can't even like come into your house, but regardless, they are some of the most feared creatures of the night ever, because they can shapeshift, they can fly. Later on in the mythos, they got more charming. This is more attributed to like European culture. And in this way, they became more seductive in nature, making them in some manners more frightening than their undead looking counterparts, because they can blend in, and although sunlight is still an affront to them, at night they can wild out, and because they are good looking aristocratic type characters, they can attract a lot of humans and hand them elves, which made them very feared. So that's kind of a review of most of the mythos for both of them on average. Going everywhere from European cultures, even mythos from the Americas, Balkan literature, which I want to talk about right now, actually, because that's a interesting factor I want to talk about for these two characters. So, of course, I was looking through stories throughout history. At any point in mythology or literature, before it went mainstream, did these two beings in lore cross? Got some iffy answers, but yeah, there was some crossovers that helped me make my decision on this particular matchup. So you see, there were those cases, like I said, where wereman or werewolf would come about and help humans fight off beings of evil. What were some of these beings? Vampires. What makes this interesting is that a lot of times these like werewolves or weremen would come in with prep, magic, known methods to take down the vampires, and help from the humans. And sometimes they'd still lose. Sometimes they'd still take the L. And in Balkan literature, what's fascinating is that if you look into it, they actually are stated to, like, werewolves, if taken over or if they die, their next step is vampire. They become vampires next. They're in danger of becoming vampires as their next form. So, like, vampires in that literature almost like the next stage for werewolves. So that's pretty interesting. So, in the end, who do I think wins? To me, throughout history, it seemed werewolves were more nature bound, whereas vampires were more supernatural, pretending to be natural. And because of their what appears to be quickness advantage in the mythos, their unnatural, unorthodox means of having to get rid of them, which is like typically you need to use holy items and things of that nature, whereas werewolves are more closely associated with brutality, being able to take them down, so they can't just slug it out. And I do favor the vampires on average in the mythos. Slugging it out, I think they're quicker. And overall, they also have the poison factor. I'm not quite sure how the werewolf or wereman would do against the poison that can plague entire towns from vampires. That's pretty potent. So in the end, I favor the vampire in the mythos matchup. But If you want to see me run this back with them used in popular culture, so movies, comics, all that, the best of that world, run this video up to 300 plus likes and I will get that out. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope this kind of gave you a decent answer to who would win historically if these two matched up in their mythological and lore aspects. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this Halloween themed video. It's been your boy YFE, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.